can mute, there we go. If you can mute your screen or mute your audio for the next little while, that would be great. Okay, so I am going to get us started. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do here and a little bit about Ron, and then turn the floor over to Ron. So we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Nations for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations, and may we honor those teachings. And I know we're all in sometimes different places in Zoom land, but it's good to know where we are and acknowledge the land that we're on, and that is important to us here as well. So miigwech for that. So Enwayaang is a kind of a fun thing we used to do once a year with a lot of people in a panel discussion and engaging chats, and then we'd have a meal together. It was amazing. It was in the pre-pandy times, and then we'd have a lovely chit chat and a panel discussion, and then we would all go away and think that January thing was great. So when the pandemic happened, we decided in Zosky that we could probably do this in a different format with the idea really that the talks could be still passionate and engaging and informal and kind of just a fun, interesting way to hear more from more people. We have had a lot of great feedback from the community that just new ideas and different connections have been one of the things that's been beautiful about this. And we've had a lot of community support and a lot of Trent students, Trent faculty and staff, many of who I see on screen today, and also community members who have joined in. And that's been a really nice way that we have felt connected. What I have said in the past is that Zoom can be engaging if you do it well, and if people are open to conversation. You can do this and you can make it an engaging experience. So thank you to all of you for that. So Enwayaang means the way we speak together. It's the name of the big yellow building that Zosky College is found in. We take that quite literally, and we try to speak together in all that we do, and that's how we named the series. I am very delighted to have Ron Kronstein with us today. Ron is an accomplished senior news anchor and communications strategist with 30 years of cross-platform media expertise. 10 of them served as an Army communications strategist. He's well-versed in securing sources, conducting interviews, facilitating collaboration between industry professionals across the globe. He moved to Peterborough in March of 2018 to assume his current role as manager of news and television operations at Chex TV Global, and that's part of the Chorus Entertainment I guess, management team. And Ron works there with a seasoned team of news professionals. They're great. I know lots of people watch Chex. I found that out this week, Ron, when I had like 4 minutes on Chex, and all my family members called me to talk about that.
And you were great, by the way. You were great.
Thank you. And Ron has always been very involved in the community, which is what we're seeing tonight, which we really appreciate. He has taken active roles in Canadian Cancer Society fundraising efforts, and he has and continues to support the United Way, first in his time in Halifax and now in Peterborough. Ron was given a special recognition award from the National Canadian Cancer Society and has received the RTDNA President's Award for his contributions to broadcasting. So we're really happy to have such expertise in Peterborough and to have such a willing expert here to talk with us at Trent and at Zosky College. And Ron is also an honorary fellow of Zosky College, so really grateful to have you as an honorary member of our team. So thanks everyone for coming. Thank you, Ron, for being here. And I'm turning the floor to you.
Well, thank you very, very much. And first of all, let me tell you what an honor it is to be here with you here this afternoon. I'm a big fan of Trent University and everybody there, and that's the instructors and the teachers and the professors and everybody there. You do a wonderful job. And it's a beautiful campus. And, I got to congratulate you because Maclean's came out today, and Trent University is the #1 undergraduate university in Ontario for the 11th year in a row, and the #3 university undergraduate in Canada. And that's just a couple of the categories that Trent has come in 1 and 2. And it's phenomenal. So congratulations to you, and thank you once again. I've spent most of my life in journalism. I think my first job was 18 years old when I was an anchor. I had no business being an anchor, but I ended up getting a job as an anchor, and I learned along the way. I spent many of my years doing anchoring, reporting, managing editor. I've reported on just about every beat. About 15 or 17 years ago, I think I was laid off it'll be almost 20 years ago now. I was laid off at CTV during one of the big economic shuffles that they did. And I ended up joining the Army and became an Army Public Affairs officer. And not just, the guy in uniform, I actually had to do all the training. So I don't recommend that. If you're going through a midlife crisis, get the red sports car. It's a lot more fun than joining the Army and doing basic training. But I ended up retiring from the military as a captain and had the good fortune of coming to global television, actually, when Chorus bought out the station in Halifax and they wanted someone there who knew the market. I went there for 4 years, was the senior anchor there, and then got the opportunity to come here on a manager's position. So yes, I'm happy to be here. I've got a great place to hang my hat, and I've got some great people that I'm working with. The topic of this discussion is journalism, diversity, and adaptation in changing times. And I cannot think of a group of words that should fit in one sentence better. Journalism, adaptation, diversity. Things have changed so much in the last 5 years. They've changed incredibly in the last 2 years with the COVID pandemic, that we are all looking at, not just our industry, but all industries are looking at diversifying who we have on air, diversifying our thinking, diversifying our ideas, diversifying our voices, and adapting to some rapid technological change, not all of which is good. So there are some big challenges in journalism right now. I mean, a lot of people say this started with Trump. We never were in a position or never in a situation before where someone got away with lying like they did every day and people just bought it. We've never been in a position where people were just inundated day in and day out with the rudeness, the craziness, all the stuff that was going on with Trump. The pandemic has a lot to do with this as well, because the isolation that the pandemic created for many of us who really didn't go out anywhere. We were locked in our homes doing our homework or working everything online. The pandemic created an isolation that made people search for answers elsewhere. And the pandemic also created some technological things that we're dealing with, like right here, right now. A lot of people turned to the digital platforms for their news. And that's fine. There are legitimate news organizations, CTV, Global, Ontario, like TVO, the Globe and Mail, and National Post, you name it, the National Observer, all newspapers, all television, all radio, they're all legitimate news services, but they work on conventional platforms. And in the same time, the conventional news organizations have been looking at their business model. We've also had a number of digital news platforms pop up, dozens of them, some of them excellent, some of them atrocious. And it's the atrocious ones that have caused the problems for us. Now, what are the problems facing our news organizations? The Press Gazette, which is a very respected website in Britain that looks after, journalism generally, English-speaking journalism, they have identified trust, truth, and making news pay as the biggest challenges in journalism. Now, they got some quotes here. Marty Barron, the executive director at the Washington Post, says, "The biggest challenge for journalism is that facts aren't accepted as facts anymore. Societies can't agree on a common set of facts. We can't even agree on what constitutes a fact. That's a challenge for journalism, which traditionally has been an arbiter of fact, the gatekeeper, relying on expertise, experience, education, and above all, evidence to assess what's true and what's false." And there's one more quote I want to read here for you. Nicholas Carlson, who's the global editor-in-chief at The Insider, he says these are all knowable facts. He said, okay, let me start from the beginning. The biggest challenge for journalism today is also one for the world. The truth is not dead, but it's been beaten to a pulp by politicians, media personalities, and grifters, all for mere power and profit. There are all knowable facts. Climate change is real. The 2020 US elections were the most secure in history. Systemic racism exists. COVID-19 is killing people. The earth is round. And yet each one of these scientifically demonstrable truths are somehow considered controversial, which is frightening, which is really frightening. And it's been perpetuated by a number of factors. Some of those factors being that for a long time in our society, in our North American society, Canada and the US, there have been a lot of people who have felt powerless. There have been a lot of people whose voices have not been heard. Mainstream media perhaps didn't do a good job of making their voices heard or making their issues important. Politicians weren't good at representing them. So when these alternate news sources came up that put out what people wanted to hear, these became truths. So for me and for you and for most people, it's hard to think that people would not understand that science is science. It actually proves things. It's hard to understand how people can turn their back on science. But one of the things with this pandemic was the fact that a lot of people were concerned about the science that was coming out. It was rapidly evolving. Not all the answers were there. Some of the things changed. So that created a doubt that science could not supersede. In many cases, people don't want to hear the facts. When their mind is made up and they believe something, no amount of fact-based information can come out and change their minds. We saw that during Trump when people were being told, no, there is no crime, there is no crookedness, we don't have this happening. You could give them all the evidence in the world, but they did not want to believe it. So one of the biggest challenges we have as a news organization is, how do we convince people that we are telling the truth? We saw probably not only the most expensive election campaign, but the most divisive election campaign that we've had in this country in a long time. You know, it's hard to believe that Canadian politics was ever like this. It never was. You know, politicians in Canada usually conducted their campaigns, they dealt with the issues, they argued about the issues, and they didn't come up with the dirty tricks and the nastiness and the cult of personalities that we've associated with now. So the elections are very, very difficult to cover as journalists, and they also are polarizing to the electorate. So we, for example, on a daily basis, were accused of being too soft on the Liberals. We were accused of being too hard on the Conservatives. We were accused of not saying anything about the NDP. If everybody's complaining about you, obviously you're doing your job, because we were covering everybody equally all the time, as we are mandated to do. But you cannot keep everybody happy. So you just push on and work the way you can and do the job that you know is right and do the job that you know you have to do. We are governed by laws. We are governed by very, very strict codes of ethics and principles. We have to do that. We have to make sure that we do that, because if we report something and it's not true, our credibility is lost. And then if we don't have our credibility, we have no viewers, therefore we have no ad revenue, therefore we have no TV station. The model of the broadcast industry and newspapers, the media model is broken, because conventional television is still important, as are newspapers, but there are entire generations of people now who have never watched a newscast on TV. They don't have cable. My kids are all in their 30s. They don't watch television news. They get all their news from multiple reputable sources online. And I imagine TikTok too, and Instagram. But that's the problem. There's nothing wrong with social media if you get your news from a source that you believe is a reputable source. It has to be a reputable source. You're not going to get it from Instagram. You're not going to get it from TikTok. You're not going to get it from Facebook. If you're following a stream and you see the news that's there and it's from a reputable source, that's okay. But a lot of the stuff that's on social media is misleading, misrepresenting. And how important is online? Well, it's very important. And that's one of the things we are doing as a network and as a company. Chorus is a company that represents all kinds of entertainment in this country. We're almost as, well, day to day, we're almost as big as Bell Media. We have something like 40 specialty channels. We have Slack. We're on Roku. We are very much interested in getting online, streaming our newscast, so that's available to anybody, anytime, anywhere in the world. So that's what we're doing right now. And why is that? Let me read you some stuff from Forbes magazine. Global online content consumption is making a rapid incline. In 2021, the average daily time spent consuming online content is 6 hours and 59 minutes. That's on a phone, on a tablet, on a laptop, on your smart TV, on any form of digital content platform. That's a lot of time spent on one source, one platform to get your information. Now, obviously, A lot of that time spent on Facebook, a lot of time spent on TikTok, Instagram, whatever platform there is, it's out there, Twitter. But a lot of people are getting their main sources of information from social media. And social media has become, there's a lot of good about it. There's an awful lot of good about it. But social media has become a really, really ugly place for a lot of people. To the point where now in our network, being on Twitter, for example, is no longer a prerequisite of your job. And that's been because people on Twitter have done some horrible things to journalists right across the country. You can probably see it on Twitter anyway, if you look for it. They have made horrible threats. They have threatened violence against people, sexual violence against people. They have been racist. They have really done some horrible things to journalists, which has caused a lot of journalists to leave this industry for their safety. And we take this very seriously. And I don't know if you noticed it this week, but I think just this week, all the major media outlets in Canada combined together as a unified voice against online hate and online harassment of our journalists. And we are taking this very seriously now. We have hired security firms. We are prosecuting. We are not going to let people get away with this because that's not what you do. You cannot do that to people. It's a decline in civility that has accompanied all this stuff. So there's not one thing, I think, that has done this. It's a group of things that have done this. And the question is, how do we get back to that place where people aren't afraid to log on to Twitter, or people aren't afraid to do this, or people aren't afraid to do their jobs? We've had reporters yelled at in the streets for whatever grievance that people have. It was very difficult to do our election coverage stories because people were complaining about, where we were and what we were and who we were favoring and things like that. So it's become a great big challenge. Now, how do we do this? How do we accept, we keep doing the jobs that we're doing. We keep, making inroads into ensuring that people understand that what we're saying is true. And we do that by practicing good journalism. We also do that by diversifying our voices. It's important to include all voices in the conversation. It really is. It's important to have a diverse staff. Our industry, as well as many other industries, kind of fell behind in making sure that the people we had representing our station were diverse. We have made huge inroads in the last little while. We will continue to make huge inroads until we get to a point where the balance is correct. We are encouraging the hiring of more diverse reporters. We are looking to journalism schools to make sure that they train more diverse reporters. And not only to get diversity in how someone looks, but you get diversity in how someone thinks. Because the bottom line is, can you imagine what a newscast would be like if we only interviewed 50-year-old white people and up? Would you get an accurate reflection on what society is like? No. If we interviewed people who are only making $150,000 a year, that wouldn't give us an accurate reflection of what society was like. And at the end of the day, we are not only gatekeepers, but we are also supposed to be a reflection of our community. And the good and the bad and the indifferent. And our job is primarily to give people information so that they can make the decisions in their life that people can actually look and seek the information to help them make a better decision. Whether it's an election, whether it's a municipal affair, whether it's a health issue, our job is to give you information that you can trust, that you can then make up your mind and go and do what you need to do to find out more information. We don't want you to be watching us as your only source of news. We want you to read the major newspapers. We want you to read all sources, but we want you to know that when you do come to us, and the same thing is felt by CTV, and the same thing is felt by CBC, and the Globe and Mail, and the National Post, and the Toronto Star. We want to make sure that when you do come to us, you will get a diverse, factual, and true sense of what is going on in the news. We're never going to be able to tell you everything that's going on because we simply don't have the money to do it. Oh, that's another point too. We got to make it pay because journalism is expensive. Journalism is very expensive. We have to pay people. We have to have facilities. We have to have equipment. We have to have platforms. We have to have technology. And adapting to technology is one of our biggest challenges. And Global has actually taken the lead in a lot of this industry in making adaptations to technology to make it easier for you to see our news products. But we need to have a diversity of thought. We need to have a diversity of compassion. We need to have a diversity of empathy. We need to be confident that we are going to go out and be able to ask the questions that we need to ask. There's no guarantee that people are going to answer those questions, as we see when we're dealing with politicians. But we need to make sure that we do that, because our job is to ask the questions that you have and that you can't ask. So we try to reach out as much as possible, and with the guidance and the ethics that we have in journalism and the hard work, because journalism is hard work. Sometimes you work on a story for 3-4 days and nothing comes of it. Then all of a sudden you'll get a story and it comes together in one deal. But it is a great career, and it is necessary, because all good societies have a freedom of the press, have a freedom of speech that isn't interfered by the government, that isn't influenced by the government, that isn't threatened by the government, that is allowed to report on all issues that the people need to know about. Because at the end of the day, you are taxpayers. We are all taxpayers. Everybody in a public position answers to us and are accountable to us for their actions. And we need to make sure that we get the information, and we get the service, and we get the consideration that we need from that. And we also have to be there to show you a little bit of a reflection of your community, the good and the bad. You know, years ago, I went to a facility in the United States where they trained anchors and producers. It was a big consulting firm. And we were talking about, programming or producing the best newscast ever. How are you going to do that? Well, every journalist in the room said it'd be filled with fires, corruption, murder, crime, storms, you name it. All the stuff, the old bleeds it leads stuff. And the instructor, who was a Northwestern University journal instructor, and said, yep, that's what I expected you to say. And you realize that no one would watch that for more than a minute and a half, because it would be so depressing that no one would want to watch a newscast of nothing, just of bad news. What you've got to do is you've got to give people the problem, and you've got to give people what the solution could be, or what people are doing to make that solution happen. So you've got to give people an idea that there are problems out there, and there are bad things happening out there, but there are good things happening that nobody hears about. And there are solutions to these problems. And there are people working on this, and there are people banding together and doing that, because that is what we do as human beings, whether it's in Peterborough or Toronto or anywhere. That's what we do. So journalism is more than giving you a set of facts and telling you a story. It's also allowing you to understand your community a little better, and allowing you to understand the workings of your community a little better, understanding the processes that you need to know. And I think that's really, really important. Now, I'm a baby boomer. I'm coming from a generation where one day this is going to be handed over to younger reporters and younger producers and younger news directors. And I think this is a great career. It's a difficult career. We've lost a lot of people. But with the change in technology and the change in the way that news is actually broadcast, better word, delivered, because it's not always broadcast, you can get it off a podcast. You can get it off any kind of platform you want, whether it's a website, a radio website, a TV website, Vice, whatever you want, you can get it off that. But we need to be able to do that on a basis that reflects the society we have. The population is getting older. We've got a younger population moving in. You are going to inherit all this stuff. We did a pretty good job as baby boomers of some stuff. We buggered up a lot of other stuff. So we need to make sure that when we do hand it over, or when you take it over, that the next generations of journalists will be armed and equipped and prepared to deal with the technology and the demands of journalism. Journalism hasn't changed that much. The fundamental functions of journalism are the same. It's going out, talking to people, getting this side of the story, getting that side of the story. Somewhere in between this side of the story and that side of the story is in the middle, which is usually the truth. But you got to get that. You got to tell the story. You have to be fair. You have to be ethical. You have to be decent. You have to be honest. That's the same today as it was in 1903. So the only thing that's different is technology. There used to be a day when you had to wait for your film to develop for 4 hours before you could cut it. You do one story a day. During the Falklands War, we had to wait for I don't know. I was in my 20s, and then you had to wait for like a week and a half for film from the Falklands War to arrive back in Canada, because they literally had to bring the film back on a ship from the tip of South America, bring it back to England, then they had to process and then to deliver it. So all that news was a year old. Today, it's here and in your system before it's even finished feeding. So, the technology has given us speed, unprecedented speed, which is not always good, because if you have unprecedented speed, sometimes you are, in the early days of live television was a big issue because you were reporting things before you knew what was going on. Now, the rule is don't be first, be right. Make sure you know what you're saying, make sure you understand the situation, then you can report. And that's not always what all the sources do. So, like I said, takeaway, the big important thing is make sure the sources that you get your information from are credible, that tell the truth, and get as many sources as you can. Read everybody. Social media has its place, has its good and its bad. But social media also needs to undergo a change so that it is not as offensive, not as scary, to be honest with you, as it has been. I'm amazed at what people are retweeting in emails that they've got. I can't believe that people are getting emails like that. It is horrible. It is horrible. And it's simply because they're doing their job, and it's simply because people don't like them because of the color of their skin or their name. And